Then, Senator Shoebridge, you have the call.
Thanks, Chair. I've got some questions about weapons exports. My first question is, do we have any current military export permits with Sudan? Between 2017 and 2023, there were 9 active permits. And I'm just wondering how many we have now.
Senator David Knuckles, First Assistant Secretary, Defence Trade, Regulation and Industrial Collaboration. I think your question was, do we have any permits for Sudan? Is that correct?
And noting that between 2017 and 2023 there were 9 active permits?
I'd have to take that on notice. I don't have that data with me.
All right. Well, I mean, Sudan's in the middle of an appalling war driven by its neighbours and others in the region. And you're saying you're not sure whether or not we're exporting weapons to Sudan?
As I said, Senator, I don't have that data with me.
Well, are there any export permits to Sudan?
I think I've just answered the question. I don't have that data with me.
Well, you say you don't, but do you know? I mean, you're responsible for exports. You surely would know whether or not we're exporting weapons into a conflict like Sudan.
I think I said I'll take that on notice.
Okay, you don't know. You're taking on notice because you don't know?
I think, Senator, you know that officials aren't required to provide a reason. The officials
Well, they are,
taken it on
actually.
notice.
They are required. You can't just say, I'll take it on notice.
I believe that officials may take any matter on notice so as to ensure that they provide accurate information to the Senate.
But also, if you'd listened to the Chair, Minister, officials are required to provide what evidence and what knowledge they have when they're sitting at the table. So again, I'm just going to ask Mr Knuckles, do you know if Australia has any defence export permits with Sudan?
Senator, I think I've just said I don't, and that's why I would take that on notice.
You now say you don't. All right. You do know that the UN has found that the United Arab Emirates is diverting weapons to the RSF militia in Sudan. Are you aware of that? If not you, is anyone in defence aware of this?
Senator, as we've discussed before, apologies, Hugh Jeffrey, Deputy Secretary, Strategy, Policy, Industry. As we've discussed before, we do keep all export permits under contemporaneous review.
Have you reviewed?
I've been familiar with the reports that you mentioned in relation to the ongoing conflict in Sudan. In the case of all extant permits, we'll be looking at those. We'll be looking at decisions that we've made in relation to export permits and review them if circumstances change.
Have you reviewed any weapons permits to Sudan as a result, or to the UAE, as a result of the UN's finding that the UAE is diverting weapons to the RSF militia in Sudan?
Senator, you'll forgive me, we've had this conversation before. A permit does not equate to a weapon. A permit can equate to a range of things. So when you're asking me questions about weapons permits, I will refer you to our previous evidence around the fact that we grant permits for a range of controlled goods, which could be weapons in and of themselves. It could be,
have you reviewed any weapons,
items.
Any military export permits, however you want to describe them, that have been granted to either Sudan or the United Arab Emirates since the UN found that the UAE is diverting weapons to the RSF militia in Sudan?
Senator, we will take on notice in relation to the question that Dr. David Knuckles took from you in relation to the question on exports to, or export permits in relation to Sudan.
Well, I've asked about both Sudan and the UAE. You would know. I assume you're the head of the area, which is not massive, which does this work. You would know whether or not there is any review of existing export permits for control goods to Sudan or the UAE. And if you do know that, you should answer it. That's your job in estimates. and it's the inquirement as the chair read out at the beginning. Do you know if there's a review?
Yeah.
I'm asking you, Mr. Knott.
So, Senator, when we look at, and as Mr Jeffrey just said, when we look at any permit application, we look at them on a case-by-case basis, and as Mr Jeffrey said, a permit does not equate to a weapon. We look at controlled goods on the DSGL, or the Defence Strategic Goods
That really
List.
wasn't my question.
And-
My question was, have you done a review? And you're just giving me the same answer 7 times that I've already heard 7
Senator.
times in 7 different estimates. He's deliberately trying to chew up time.
He's not, but you're also
and
asking
is
the same
unhelpful.
question 7 different times too.
Well, I'm
But, like,
asking
just
about a
let the
review of the
witness-
permits. I don't want a history lecture on the permits. Is there a review of the permits?
So, Senator, I was seeking to respond to your question. So there's a range of ways that we manage permit applications. We run due diligence over the application. So that is comprehensive checks on the potential end user, their compliance history, links to any high-risk jurisdictions. We also engage across the Commonwealth in terms of intelligence holdings, so that's at a whole-of-government level. So we'll take advice from partner agencies in terms of their reporting, and potentially that might even involve international partners as well. We have a potential then to use either an end-use or non-transfer certificate that goes with the application, and so that provides us an opportunity to seek confirmation from the end user that they will work to specific constraints that we might have around that, which would obviously mean export to a third country, and then obviously potentially permit conditions might be attached to the permit that we provide, and there might be sort of limiting permit parameters, length of time, number of items, etc. So there are a range of ways that we would manage a particular permit application, and then, as I think we have provided testimony in previous estimates, as circumstances change, then potentially we'll need to keep things under review.
Have you undertaken a review of any export permits of controlled goods to either Sudan or the UAE since the UN found that the UAE is diverting weapons to the RSF militia? Have you undertaken a review?
So, Senator, I think I've answered the question.
No, you
in the
haven't,
sense that we
Mr. Knuckles.
constantly keep things under scrutiny and review, in the sense that if circumstances change and there's a requirement to go back and
Well, there's
look
kind
at
of a genocide happening, so
permits that will
circumstances have
actually-
changed. Have you undertaken a review of weapons exports either going to Sudan, where there's a genocide going on, or going to the UAE, which is diverting weapons to a genocide in Sudan? Have you undertaken a review in light of that? And if you can't say that, and we just get this discursive non-answer because it's embarrassing because there's weapons going into a genocide, just tell me that.
Senator, if it helps you, I will say that I have not directed a review. I think Mr. Knuckles' answer is not an attempt to obscure this
No
point.
review. All right, I get it. No review.
Ask me,
No
if you
review.
could let me finish, Senator Shoebridge. The point I think we're trying to make is we discuss these issues all the time. It is the legislative criteria on which our export control regime works means that the kinds of questions you're asking us happen as a matter of course. If there is extant permits, we need to keep them under contemporaneous review, and that's the way it works.
I know the Coalition wants to get to other agencies. There's no review. You haven't asked for a review, and there's no review.
What we're saying to you is that if there is a permit, Senator Shoebridge, they're always being reviewed against contemporary conditions.
Well, have they been reviewed against contemporary conditions? Has anyone looked at the fact of the genocide?
I think I've just...
No, let me finish. Has anyone looked at the fact of the genocide, the fact of the UAE feeding weapons into the genocide, the fact that the UAE is one of our largest destinations for exports of weapons, and the fact that we also had previously, and we probably still do, have export permits to Sudan, and there's a genocide going on? Has anyone looked at those facts?
Well, Senator, you're asserting a range of facts there. I think, obviously the question on genocides are
obscene levels of killing you can see from satellite levels.
Important one, and we wouldn't, in answering the question, necessarily endorse your description.
Well, what about the piles of bodies? Well, put to one side genocide. The piles of bodies you can see from a satellite level as a result of the killing, the mass killing that's been undertaken by the RSF, that the UAE is arming. Let's say it's not genocide. Let's just say the piles of bodies you can see from the satellites. In light of that, have you done a review?
Senator, I think we've answered your question.
Have you done a review since we can see those piles of bodies? From a force that we know is being armed by the UAE, who Australia has large-scale weapons exports to. Have you done a review?
We have discussed these issues.
Have you done a review?
In the course of our work, and we always engage on ensuring, we always work on ensuring that where there are extant permits, current permits, that we review them against contemporary control.
Between the 1st of January and just the 31st of March this year, Australia gave the green light for 8 defence military goods permits to the UAE. How many are there currently with the UAE?
Senator, again, are you saying that they're military export permits? Or are you saying that they're
permits
export
issued
permits
by
for
your
controlled
office.
goods?
You can call them whatever you like. For the rest of this, I'm going to call them export permits, being the permits that are both Part 1 and Part 2. Some are for lethal goods going to military. Some can be used for military purpose. I'm, going forward, going to call them export permits issued by your office.
And some are non-lethal and completely unrelated.
Yeah, like the non-lethal
military
F-35
items.
parts, I get it. Between the 1st of January and the 31st of March 2025, your department has green-lighted 8 of these export permits to the UAE. How many are current with the UAE?
Well, Senator, I'd have to take that data question on notice. I don't have that specifically with me at the moment. I know that we are under the government's requirement to publish more data from a transparency perspective. We've been doing that throughout the last 3 or so quarters of the last financial year. I just don't have that data on hand. I would, though.
So you came here in light of what we've seen
Mr. Jeffrey's
of
comments.
the killing in Sudan, the industrial scale killing in Sudan, in light of the knowledge and the repeated reporting of the record levels of defence exports to the UAE. You came here without any preparation for questions about military exports or export permits to the UAE. You didn't come with any preparation for that. Is that what you're telling me? No numbers, no details.
So, Senator, we published that data, which I think may be the data that you're quoting.
In March.
We issue about 3,500 permits per annum.
I'm asking you about the UAE.
I don't have all of the detail or data on every single
country. Not only
country,
have you come here
or the 3,500 permits that we issue on an annual basis.
No details about defence permits, about export permits to the UAE. You make it pretty clear that even in light of the obscene levels of killing and the known links that I put to you, you haven't even done a review. Now, Minister, are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable? I mean, you've probably seen the images, the piles of bodies, the killing by the RSF, the clear evidence that the UAE is arming the RSF. We probably have we have an unknown number of export permits to the UAE, and they haven't even done a review. Are you comfortable with that?
Senator, I think the officials have explained to you that permits are in a state of constant review, and I think that the challenge that you are encountering is that officials have explained to you that that's the case, and you appear to be drawing us a distinction that suggests that they're not reviewing.
Because they haven't reviewed them.
Well, I'm not sure that is the evidence that
evidence,
Mr. Jeffrey gave you.
My evidence is that I'm confident that we're applying sufficient scrutiny to extant permits.
Which you don't know how many there are of, and you don't know what's been exported.
Senator,
but you're confident that there's sufficient scrutiny to the unknown number of permits for unknown goods going to the UAE, given the fact that the UAE is actually arming a genocide in Sudan. But you're comfortable with that?
Senator, we've taken the question on notice that we will we'll answer the question in relation to the number of permits. And again, I'll take you back to the process around the nature of permits.
Well, it's not only the RSF that the UAE is arming. The UAE, being a equal opportunity weapons/disaster armour, is also arming the RSF, the SAF, the Sudanese armed forces. Are you aware of that they're arming both sides?
Senator, I'm familiar with the issue. I mean, I'm aware of the issue around the Sudanese civil war and the fact that the Sudanese government maintains a number of supply relationships, and as do Sudanese militia.
And are you aware that one of the UAE firms that's supplying goods to the Sudanese armed forces, in this case armoured personnel vehicles, is Calidus, C-A-L-I-D-U-S. Are you aware that that's one of the UAE weapons manufacturers that is providing APVs to the Sudanese armed forces? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the issues that you're raising.
And are you aware that Australian weapons manufacturer EOS has just signed a deal to provide remote weapon systems to Calidus for their APVs, the APVs that are found on the ground in Sudan being used in a conflict which is seeing piles of bodies on the ground? Are you aware of that?
Senator Nungan, I'm aware of the news report, and as you know, if any Australian firm wishes to export controlled goods to a foreign country, they'll require a permit.
So given that EOS has just signed a deal to provide remote weapon systems to Calidus, and given Calidus is sending its armoured personnel vehicles into Sudan in that appalling conflict, have you reviewed EOS's export permits in light of that?
Senator, again, any Australian company exporting would require a permit to do so. As we have testified before this committee before, if we had any concerns, if we do have any concerns, that in granting or in approving an application for an export permit, that so doing would risk violation of the criteria under which the legislation operates, then we wouldn't export the permit.
Are you aware that another UAE company called NIMR, N-I-M-R, provides their Ajban vehicle to the RSF? So we've got Calidus providing it to the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, and we've got NIMR, N-I-M-R, providing it to the RSF. Are you aware of that weapons flow coming from the UAE?
Not that particular instance, but I'm aware of the issues that you raise.
Are you aware that EOS also has an agreement with NIMR, N-I-M-R, to provide their remote weapon system to the Abjan vehicle? So EOS is again another equal opportunity weapons supplier, potentially providing to both the RSF and the SAF. Are you aware of that?
Senator, again, I think you're drawing a too long a bow there. If Australian companies are exporting, they require a permit, and it'll be subject to the same process that we've explained to you before. That process is specifically designed to ensure that we apply a export control regime to ensure that there are no exports of potentially lethal items that would be in contravention to Australia's national interests. I
think we can call a remote weapon system a lethal item. Even Foreign Minister Wong might admit that a remote weapon system is lethal. Do you think a remote weapon system is lethal, Mr. Jeffries?
Senator, at the last estimates, I think you raised a similar sort of point about EOS. And I think one of the ways we responded in testimony was to indicate that EOS is an international company. And I would just reiterate the point that Mr. Jeffrey made a short while ago, and that is that if a company in Australia is seeking to export goods that may be on the DSGL, that they would need to come for a permit. And therefore, as Mr. Jeffrey said, we will run through the normal process. And depending on the destination, we may, as I explained earlier in my testimony this evening, apply a range of conditions, quite specific conditions about what could happen with that item as it's exported and the fact that it cannot then be exported to a third country.
And has anyone brought EOS in and asked them for assurances, or otherwise, that their remote weapon systems are not being put on vehicles in the UAE and then exported into the appalling conflict in Sudan? Have you done that? Have you brought them in and asked them?
So, Senator, as I said,
Have you brought them in and asked
We have a
them?
range of ways of ensuring that our understanding of how these items might be exported and how they are used. We engage specifically with the company.
You haven't brought them in and asked them. I get it.
So we
haven't.
explicitly engage with the company every time that they might come to us with
Have you brought them in and asked them?
application. And so if we felt that there were issues in the way that we were uncertain about how that particular item might be used, we would then engage and we would provide an RFI to the company, request for information to then get
I'm not
more
asking
detail
about. I'm not
on
asking
how
about
they
the theoretical
might.
process,
Come on, let's
Mr.
just get
Nockels.
back.
I'm asking: have you brought them in and asked them? Have you asked EOS about their arrangements with NIMA and Calidus for provision of remote weapon system, given the fear that they will turn up in Sudan? Have you asked them?
So, Senator, I think I've answered the question in how we manage
I'm not
permits.
interested in the process. I'm asking if you asked EOS. Have you brought them in and asked them?
So when, as I just explained a second ago, when a company applies for a permit, we would then potentially ask them a range of questions about
Potentially.
how that... Well,
I'm not asking about potentials. I'm not asking about the theory. I'm not asking about the process. Mr. Nockels, is quite late. I'm asking whether or not you've asked EOS.
Well, I was just trying to answer your question.
No, you weren't. Have you asked EOS?
I think the challenge here, Senator Shoebridge, is officials have on many occasions told you that they are not in a position to confirm specific details about the permits in question. You are asking them to confirm the nature
No, I'm
of the
asking them if
permit.
they've made an inquiry of EOS. It's a pretty straightforward query. Have you made an inquiry of EOS?
Senator, as I said, when we deal with companies and they apply for permits, we engage with them.
This is some sort of Groundhog Day. Have you made an inquiry of
Answering
EOS?
your question, Senator, in terms of permits.
Well, look, I get it's embarrassing you haven't asked EOS, given what we've seen happening on the ground. I get it's embarrassing that EOS is working with companies that are arming both sides of the appalling conflict in Sudan. I get it's awkward. But did anyone at the Team Australia Defence Expo at Dubai, at the recent Dubai Arms Fair, which had both Defence and EOS, did anyone at Team Defence Australia ask them when they were sharing a tent at a Dubai Arms Fair just recently? Did you
Senator,
ask EOS then?
I think, as Senator McAllister has said, we're not going to go into individual permits and how they relate to individual companies. As you know, we have commercial in confidence obligations in respect to our companies.
Genocide's commercial in confidence.
That's point one. Point two is, of course, your statements here make a whole range of assumptions, which I think are important to just underline that the absence of a conversation with a particular company does not mean that we don't have concerns. It may mean that there is not an export of which we have a concern.
Well, then we finally get the answer. The absence of a conversation with a particular company. I appreciate we finally got the answer.
I'm just putting it in hypothetical. It's not an answer in that
sure
way, Senator. Don't put words in my mouth.
Yeah, I'm mindful of time.
What we are
Senator.
talking
Have you got
about
other
here
questions on other topics
is you're making an assumption if there was not a direct engagement with a particular company, that therefore that by definition we're not
Well, what you
engaging on a
could do,
particular
Mr.
risk.
Jeffries, you could answer this.
It may mean that we do not think there is a
You could
risk.
answer this problem. You could say, we have reviewed the export permits for EOS. We've reviewed it in light of the appalling conflict in Sudan. And having reviewed them, we are satisfied of X or Y or Z. But you see, you haven't reviewed them, and that's awkward. And because you haven't reviewed them, we get these long, discursive,
Senator, that's not my
procedural
testimony.
answers from Mr. Nockels.
Senator,
Well, have you reviewed them?
That's not my testimony. I said that I am confident we haven't conducted sufficient scrutiny.
While we're on weapons exports, and we're getting record levels of disclosure from this government, could I ask about Part 1 and Part 2 export licences, defence permits? I asked for a breakdown of current Part 1 and Part 2 permits by country in question reference, I think, number 74. And Defence said a historical breakdown of these permits in the format requested is not centrally held. Now, first of all, that's not an answer, and whether it's centrally held or not isn't really the issue. but I wasn't seeking an historical breakdown. I was asking for a current Part 1 and Part 2 permits by country, and why haven't you given them?
Sorry, Senator, is this in relation to a particular quant
Question on
or
notice.
FOI?
It's a question on notice. At the last round of estimates, I asked for a breakdown of current Part 1 and Part 2 permits by country, and you said a historical breakdown of these permits in the format requested is not centrally held. 2 points. Whether it's centrally held or not is not the question. If you have the material, you should provide it. And secondly, I wasn't asking for an historical breakdown, just the current Part 1 and Part 2 permits by country. Why won't you give it?
Senator Shoebridge, I think officials are trying to locate the Quan in question. Do you have a number, just so that we're all talking about the
Portfolio
same
question
thing?
reference number 74.
Great, thanks.
To 25-26 supplementary budget estimates, type of question, written 16 October 2025.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've answered the question to you, Senator.
No.
Well,
Is there some alternate universe happening here, Mr Nockels? I said, can you provide a breakdown of extant, meaning current, defence export permits as of November 2025, broken down by country and by Part 1 or Part 2? And you said a historical breakdown of these permits in the format requested is not centrally held. So first of all, whether it's centrally held or not is irrelevant. And secondly, I wasn't asking for an historical breakdown. I was asking for the current ones. Why won't you provide
well, when you
the
say
export permits as of November 1, 2025, broken down by country and by Part 1 or Part 2?
Well, as we say in our response, Senator, we publish this type of data. One of the changes to the way we publish the data is to break it up into Part 1 and Part 2, and that is published.
But it's not
on
by
our
country,
website.
it's by weird region. I'm asking by country.
I think you'll find that the current way that we are representing the data on the website is by country. That was one of the changes that we made
Pointing to another database is not answering the question. Will you now, Minister, you surely accept there should be some basic level of transparency, and you surely accept that if asking something that has been provided repeatedly before, breakdown by country, Part 1 and Part 2, it was answered in the 2024-25 budget estimates in answer to question 106. It's been provided before. Surely the most basic level of scrutiny from your government should be able to at least provide what you provided last year. Why won't they?
So, Senator, I think I've sought to answer your question in that the way that we currently are publishing the data on a quarterly basis is breaking it down by country and by Part 1 or Part 2 of the DSGL. I think you are seeking something that goes back some years, and the way the data has worked.
No, extant, current defence exports.
Well, that's my point, that some of these permits may have been issued up to 4 or 5 years ago, and in the way that we have the current data, we haven't set it up in a way other than the last 12 months or so to go back that far.
So you don't have, you can't identify, well, so you can't have it both ways, Mr Nockels. You can't say the current defence, the live defence exports are under constant review and you're always looking to see whether or not there's human rights or other issues, you've got it under constant review, and then when I ask you about them, you say you don't even know which ones are current. You can't have it both ways. It makes no sense. Well, maybe you can because we live in some alternate universe where Labor and the Coalition agree on this. But in a rational world, you can't have it both ways.
So again, Senator, I think you are putting words in my mouth. I was seeking to explain how the data is represented in the current way that we collate it and in the way that we've changed the collection of the data.
You see, Mr Nockels, if you can't give me a list, if you can't give me a list of what the current export permits are by country, how the bloody hell can you review those current export permits to see whether or not they are in breach of our obligations not to further a genocide or otherwise offensive to our laws or standards? If you can't even say which they are.
Yeah, Senator, look, I think, as you know, the data we provide publicly on the website we have sought to expand at government direction, including in response to your questions to this committee. at this committee over several years. We've sought to increase as much as possible the transparency we
You
apply
are kidding
to the
me.
export process. However, as you know,
thank
Senator,
God there's a roof and lightning's not coming
as you
down.
know, Senator, that commitment to transparency also has to exist in parallel with a commitment to our Australian exporters who require a degree of
Minister, last year your government could give this data.
confidentiality.
Last year your government could give this data. This year you say you can't. Your department is saying you now have record levels of transparency. I got this exact data last year. Minister, why can't you provide the same data this year that you provided last year?
I think Senator officials have sought to explain the limitations on what they can and can't provide from a technical perspective. I understand your interest in
seeing if we're arming a genocide. Yeah, I get it.
trying to understand the nature of the permits. Perhaps Mr Jeffrey can give some
can we just stop?
to what could
We're just going to stop and we're going to move, because it's time, we're going to move on to something else. But I think the record will show this obscenely bureaucratic, appalling response in circumstances where I'm concerned, my party, the Greens, is concerned about the appalling level, the industrial scale level of killing in Sudan, and this response from your department, Minister, refusing to provide basic scrutiny, refusing to answer questions about Australian weapons exports to the UAE, obfuscation and denial, does your government know credit? And you surely know that, don't you?
Senator, you have had it explained to you on so many occasions that officials are not in a position to talk to you about individual permits.
I've asked about
the majority
numbers.
of your questions this evening have included assumptions about permit holders, the nature of the products they may be seeking to export, the export destinations and their commercial arrangements with other parties. You have repeatedly asked officials implicitly to confirm those assumptions, and for all obvious reasons, given what's been explained to you about limitations on commercial and confidence arrangements, they haven't been able to answer them in the way that you would like. They have sought to explain to you the processes that are ordinarily applied to all of these things, as they've done on many other occasions. I think that a good faith exchange would involve acknowledging that you have repeatedly asked officials to confirm matters which they are not at liberty to confirm to you.
Minister,